Good afternoon. This is the Federal Subsistence Board public hearing on Wildlife Temporary Special Action Request 1603. My name is Zach Stevenson, and I'll be your meeting facilitator today. I'd also like to provide an opportunity to welcome our community leaders who are here in attendance and express my gratitude for all of those who made time out of their busy day during the height of the subsistence season to be here.
Fishing game staff are here for two reasons. One, we wanted to tell you, give you an update and tell you why the state put forward this wildlife special action, and we also want to hear your testimony and take that back with us to help inform the Board of Game.
Hi, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Lincoln Perrett, and I'm a caribou biologist with the state of Alaska. The survival of adult females has increased considerably compared to the 5 years prior to 2013. So during those years from 2007 to 2013, when the herd dropped by almost 50%, survival rates for adult females averaged about 73%. And since then, survival rates have averaged 83%, so 10% higher, and that's a big difference. In this current year that we're in right now, we estimate mortality from October to October, so we're nearing the end of that, and we're on pace right now to have the best survival rate we've had in over 15 years. Right now it's single digits, so this year in particular has been a very good year. Some other really good things about this year, we look in late March and early April to see how many calves are still in the population. This is called recruitment. During the late winter surveys, we observed 23 10-month-old calves for every 100 adult caribou, and that's the highest number again since 2007. These data also, the presence of those calves tie in and correspond well with the high survival rate of calves. We collared 30 calves at onion portage in September, and the survival rate of those was at least 75% over the winter, and that's a very high survival rate for calves. When we captured those calves, we also weighed them. These were the heaviest calves we've ever weighed at onion portage since we started that project in 2007. They were 10% higher than any calf any year that we'd ever weighed calves before. The adult body condition, we also assess adult body condition by, when we capture adults, we look at them just to put a gross estimate of whether they're skinny, very fat, very fat, or average. And the body condition we rated animals, that was very high last year. No animals were rated as skinny or very skinny. These very healthy animals going into the fall also had a very high pregnancy rate. When we did calving surveys this last June, 85% of the cows were observed to be pregnant or had given birth. And this is the second highest pregnancy rate observed for this herd since surveys began in 1987. So each of these things by themselves, each of these biological parameters kind of add up into this population model that suggests that this herd is definitely not declining at the rate that it has, and may have even approached something more like stability. And this is the new biological information that we're presenting that suggests that the herd is at over 200,000 and still in the conservative phase of the Western Arctic Herd Management Plan.
We believe that with the complexity of such a big herd covering such a big area with 4 different agencies involved, 3 federal agencies in the state, and crossing such a big area and multiple communities one after the other, that the only meaningful way in these complex situations when you have 2 boards with different mandates is to have a working group that puts together a plan and then take that plan to both boards and make them adhere to it. We do have that. We've been working with the Western Arctic Herd Working Group for 10 years and at least, and you know, the reason this group was started was because the first chair said, we can no longer take for granted that these caribou will always come through our communities. And that's the goal, is to, as another hunter said, we want to keep these caribou coming back. And that's why this group was started. And it's really important. The boards have differing mandates and they're going to do different things. So we filed this wildlife special action in response to the one that the board passed. To get the Federal Subsistence Board to adhere to this plan that, you know, probably folks in this room worked on, lots of folks from the region, and then some other interest groups as well. We think that both the Board of Game and the Federal Subsistence Board endorse this plan, and that, you know, sticking to this and making sure this is a living document, making sure it is what people want and is a good compromise, and sticking to it is the best way. the Federal Subsistence Board made an action, and on the table there describes the rules now that there's an action made. So it prevents non-federally qualified users, local users, from using the resource in Unit 23 on federal lands.
Again, I'm Larry Bartlett, and I've lived in Alaska and have been a responsible hunter of the Western Arctic herd for 21 years. I served in the U.S. Army for 12 years, survived combat tours overseas, and I served at your communities for a number of years as an active member of the Western Arctic Herd Caribou Working Group, as well as the technical committees. My homeland efforts and those who served this working group for the past 20 years were vaporized by the FSB's action to close caribou hunting to non-local hunters on federal lands in Unit 23. An equivalent comparison is the closure of the entire East Coast to hunting because of the sheer size of this region. Our efforts were in vain because the current population status of this herd has not crossed the critical threshold outlined by the working group's management strategies. Getting close to the edge of the cliff can be scary, but it's not the same as falling over the edge. This board's action was premature, and I request this closure to be rescinded pending the latest census count released by the state. The FSB cited a conservation concern and limited the minority group responsible for 5% of the annual harvest, while protecting the privileges of local hunters whose take comprises 94% of the annual harvest. That means for every one caribou I shoot, you shoot 20. That's not conservation action. It's an illegitimate bias and a gross misuse of the federal power. The broader impact of this decision sets a very dangerous precedent for other sensitive areas in the state. The FSB also cited user conflict dilemmas to justify this closure, but this decision will not solve user conflict. It will deepen the rift.
Mr. Bartlett, we've got time.
Say again?
We're approaching 3 minutes.
I'm going to finish just like Mr. Walter did.
Thank you.
The FSB deepened the rift between local and non-local hunters. Once this rift becomes too great to bridge the fight for individual rights to access and harvest the state's wildlife resources on public lands, will destroy any future chance for reconciliation between you and me. This decision was premature, and it has a bad outcome for human relations. We all agree that the Western Arctic herd is experiencing dynamic population changes, which has real and palpable effects on your way of life and your food procurement. But we also have to agree that human relations, not a biological concern, is the true cause of our current crisis. The time is now that you and me, you versus me fight is laid to rest for good. The time is now that the federal closure be reversed and the due efforts be applied to dissolve the user conflicts that are dividing our people. The time is now that you embrace this hunter and his commitment to seeing the human tensions released. Starting this Thursday, I'll explore the Kobuk and Noatak rivers, coursing through a vast swath of public lands for fishing and hunting and spiritual repair. In August, I'll get flown into an area north of Unit 23, harvest my limit of caribou and predators, and my hope is that after I cross the Continental Divide and drag my gear back into the
Sir,
Antelope River...
we passed 3 minutes. I'm sorry. We have to go to the next speaker.
I do not think so. My hope is that you not view me as a threat or a disruption to your way of life. My way of life is equally valuable and worth my continued efforts to reach out to your communities. I'm going to fill my experience, and I will return to share my journey with the people of Noatak, Norvik, and Kotzebue, and that's my promise. This is my way of recognizing the problems and addressing them with the most humble and respectful way. The fight is not my desire, but I am determined not to give up my right to hunt on federal public land. Cooperation and conflict resolution is my pledge.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Rod Arnold. I live in Palmer, Alaska. I'm the executive director of the Alaska Outdoor Council. This is a conservation organization that supports subsistence uses for all Alaskans. And the concerns that the Outdoor Council has with this special action is the fact that the Federal Subsistence Board was created to implement Title VIII of ANELCA. And when The Office of Subsistence Management, their biological team comes and says there is not a conservation concern with the caribou herd at this point, and that it does not meet the closure policy adopted by the Federal Subsistence Board. Then we're not following the rule of law, which will be very important to all Alaskans in the future to have the opportunity to continue a lifestyle that includes the harvest of wildlife. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else on the teleconference that would like to share a public comment? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Can you please speak up closer to the microphone?
Mark Richards.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Mark Richards. I'm the Executive Director of Resident Hunters of Alaska. I'm calling from Fairbanks. Our organization supports an Alaskan resident priority to all of our game resources for all resident hunters, no matter where they live or how or why they hunt. That resident priority, however, is not evident in the federal regulations when residents' last hunting opportunities are restricted before first restricting the non-resident out-of-state component. This is the case with this closure. There was overwhelming support from Unit 23 residents in 2015 for reductions in the harvest by all users rates from the Western Arctic herd. At the Board of Game March 2015 meeting, a considerable amount of time was spent listening to testimony, amending and compromising on Proposal 202, and deliberating on those reductions. In the end, and again with the majority support of local residents and ACs, the decision was made to reduce harvest by all user groups in some form. These decisions were made based on valid biological concerns over the continuing decline of the Western Arctic herd. 1 year later, this was the same ostensible rationale for this new complete closure of fed lands to all non-federally qualified subsistence hunters in Unit 23 by the Federal Subsistence Board. Before really allowing time to judge the efficacy of the Board of Game decision and restrictions from 2015. What is most troubling about the FSB's decision was that the board did not base their closure decision on the available population data and recommendations from both state and federal biologists. And data since the closure decision was made earlier this spring shows calf recruitment and survival rates are higher than ever. The estimated population of the Western Arctic herd is around 205,000 caribou, which is above the threshold between conservative management plans that the board used to institute this closure and conservative management plans that would not call for any restrictions at this time. We also want to point out something from the Federal Subsistence Board.
Mr. Richards, we're approaching time. Thank you. I just wanted to remind folks that the importance of this afternoon's conversation is to focus on the present proposal 1603, which is focused on the state's proposal to open federal public lands in Unit 23 to all users, and not Special Action 1601. Again, we're focusing on 1603. Thank you, sir. Next comment?
Can I just finish up? I have two more sentences.
You may, but we do need to move on, so be quick, please.
Resident Hunters of Alaska recommends that this closure be rescinded, that the Federal Subsistence Board review its protocols for consideration and approval of these kind of requests, and under no circumstances should any resident Alaska hunter be restricted before restrictions are placed on non-resident out-of-state hunters. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Richards.